Hello and welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Rachel Barnes, part of the Learning and Development Department with Hanger, and I have the honor of producing today's call for Regina Waker and our panelists. So I'd like to introduce our moderator, Regina Waker. She's the Vice President and General Manager for SPS Incorporated. Regina is a member of the Executive Operating Team at Hanger, a 2015 recipient of the J.E. Hanger Leadership Award, and recently appointed board member of the NAAOP, which is National Association for the Advancement of Orthotic and Prosthetics. And with that, Regina, I'll pass things over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining PowerUp. This is a webinar series designed specifically for women in O&P, and I'm really excited to be your moderator. Today's webinar has a focus on work-life effectiveness and navigating one's career. We've brought together a panel of amazing and successful women in O&P to share their experiences and perspectives. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to achieving career aspirations or striking that perfect balance between work and life. However, our hope for today is that by hearing how others have approached these things, you'll gain some insights that help you in developing an approach or plan for getting what you want in your career, or blending that career with what you want in your life. On behalf of myself, today's panelists, SPS and Hanger, I want to thank you for joining us, and also to let you know how excited we are that you're taking the time to invest in yourself. We'd love to get an idea of who has joined our call today. So Rachel, would you mind helping us with a couple of polling questions?
Absolutely. So I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll question. What is your current role with a couple options? Okay, and at this time, I'm going to close that poll and share those results. The results are 9% students, 4% residents, 17% clinicians, 30% management, and 39% others. I'll go ahead and launch the second poll question, which is, how long have you been in O&P? With multiple different answers from this is your first year to 15 plus years. Perfect. And I'll go ahead and close that poll and share those results. The results are 15% first year, 38% 1 to 5 years, 16% 6 to 10 years, 10% 11 to 15 years, and 20% 15 plus years. So thank you everybody for that.
That's great to see an array of experience within the industry. So we're glad that you guys have joined us. And for now, I'd like to take the time to meet our panelists. Please welcome Wendy Beattie. She is the Clinical and Program Director for the Masters of Science in Orthotics and Prosthetics at Eastern Michigan University. Wendy, can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure. Hi. So I'm also on the board of directors for the National Commission on Orthotic Prosthetic Education. I live in Ypsilanti, which is between Ann Arbor and Detroit in southeastern Michigan, with my husband of 25 years, which is just astonishing to say. And my adult daughter recently finished college and has moved back home. Empty nesting was great, but it's great having her back home too. I was in clinical practice for 25 years before entering education. Very passionate about O&P, and I'm delighted to be here today.
Thank you, Wendy. We're so glad you're here. Next, please welcome Leigh Davis. Leigh is a leading orthotist and prosthetist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Leigh, would you like to tell us a little more about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm an orthotist prosthetist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where my primary clinical specialty is in orthotic treatment of scoliosis. And I'm also the immediate past president of the American Academy of Orthotists and Prosthetists. I live in Atlanta with my husband and my 6-year-old son and my 3-year-old daughter. So in my spare time, I enjoy spending time with my family and trying to stay active with running and cycling.
Thank you, Leigh. And our third panelist is Gabrielle Brodehl. She's a clinic manager at the Hanger Clinic in Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Gabe, can you tell us a little more about yourself as well?
Yeah, thanks, Regina. It's really a joy to be joining you today. I do live here in Rio Rancho, New Mexico, which is a little suburb off of Albuquerque. I've been here managing the Hanger Clinic in Rio Rancho for 14 years, have been married and live here with my husband of the same amount of time, and we have 2 wonderful little delightful children who are 9 and 7. So I'm in the throes of elementary school, which is a lot of crafting, it turns out. We really love as a family to enjoy hiking and backpacking and camping, and now that our wee ones are a little less wee, we've been able to pull out the mountain bikes and do a little bit more biking too, which is pretty fun.
Thanks, Gabe. I think we'd like to start our discussion with career advice. To begin with, can we get an idea of the career paths each one of you have taken, kind of where you started, the stops you made along the way, and where you currently are now? Wendy, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I was a mechanical engineer as an undergrad because I love solving problems. But an internship between junior and senior year in college made me realize that I hate actually being an engineer. I hated the lack of contact with people. I hated the fact, working for a defense contractor, that I never wanted what I was working on to be employed. Found O&P and never looked back. Absolutely loved it. And I love patient care. I love giving something back. I love being a member of the community. I've loved being a mentor. I ran a residency program, was in clinical practice for 25 years. So I'm a CPO, was in clinical practice for 25 years. Really entered education sort of on a fluke, that one of the instructors of a local O&P school was asked to leave. And I stepped in, I taught the one class, and as luck would have it, the director retired at the end of that term, and they asked me to step in and being the director. And it's been great.
That's awesome. So rather than really having your career planned out, you really took opportunities as they came along the way. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Wendy. Gabe, would you mind taking a few minutes to tell us about your career path?
Yeah. So I had no idea that orthotics and prosthetic industry even existed when I headed off to college. I knew my heart lied in healthcare, so I knew I was heading into a profession that had to deal within the healthcare industry. So I am thankful when a good friend turned my head, thank you, Peter Springs, into this field. And so fast forward, I'm finishing up residency and accepting my first job, which is going to be a solo clinician in a startup office in this little town called Rio Rancho, New Mexico. So it's kind of like taking a dive into the deep end of the pool. With all of my vast clinical experience, that ability for me to bank on that residency knowledge, which was great, I am starting up this office. So that looked a lot like gaining a lot of clinical experience and finding a bunch of resources around me that could support me. But I'm also trying to invest in this community, really understand who this community is. So I'm networking and developing marketing strategies. I want them to know that I'm here and that my heart lies in taking care of this community. And over the course of those 5 years, I start developing and understanding that I really need to understand the business side of what do I need to do to keep these doors open? Because I love what I do. I love being able to impact people's lives. So what do I need to do to impact more lives in this community? And I started looking into business and operations, which led me into managing this team. So that was the first 5 years. And by year 5, I was expecting our first child and started working part-time, 3 days a week. And that's when I hired my first clinical team member, which was a CPED, an incredible CPED. That was 9 years ago. So 9 years, in the past 9 years, I've continued to work part-time and manage an amazing team of clinicians and administrators. The team looks more like 5 clinicians, 3 administrators, and some additional support staff like patient liaisons and business development managers. And I've been able to add a few more things to the plate, like starting a residency program and becoming a residency director, as well as helping to teach and collaborate at the local university, teaching some orthotic and prosthetic coursework to the PT and OT students. And then since I didn't know about the field, it was really important to me that we start mentoring high schoolers to let people in the community know about this field. So we've started developing a great shadowing and a mentoring program for those who might have some interest in the area. So moving to New Mexico, that was a kind of a 5-year plan, jumping that deep into the pool. And here I am, 14 years later, absolutely nailing that 5-year plan.
Thanks so much, Gabe. And Leigh, can you tell us about your path, and has your path been what you envisioned?
Yeah, so my story is a little different. That I knew pretty early on that I wanted to get into orthotics and prosthetics, because one of my early chores as a child was helping my younger brother put on his AFOs or his KAFOs every morning. He had arthrogryposis and was always wearing some different type of orthosis. So that was my early introduction to the field, at a young age. Similar to Wendy, I was an undergrad in mechanical engineering and figured out that that job is pretty lonely, boring. You have to sit in front of your computer and work on things one-on-one all day long, and that wasn't a great fit for my personality. So I ended up in clinical care here in orthotics and prosthetics. After my residency, the opportunity arose to get into pediatrics, which was always my dream here at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. But the one thing that I didn't expect was to developed this passion for scoliosis. So that happened because shortly after I moved here, our longtime scoliosis orthotist retired, and he retired relatively quickly. And so I had to, like Gabe, jump right in and figure things out quickly to be able to take care of his large patient population that needed support. And here I am 9 years later. That's mostly what I do throughout the day is see scoliosis patients. And then in the past couple of years, I've taken on some new roles to be able to do some of the management in the office, which has been a great growth experience for me.
Yeah, that's great. And for me personally, I mean, the first time I met Leigh was when she was in her residency at UNC. So, you know, to see you progress and take on leadership roles and leadership roles within the academy is it's been pretty awesome to see your growth path. So you're doing fantastic. I'm so excited for you. I'm also recognizing that this is a pretty awesome networking session as well. And speaking of, you know, networking, are there people who may have influenced you along the way? Do you guys have a mentor? Leigh, would you like to kind of go first on that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I have benefited tremendously from mentors throughout my career, you know, both in person through my residencies and here in our clinical office, and also across the country. You know, I find that orthotists and prosthetists and people in our profession are really generous with their knowledge and always ready to help someone else out. And I think that we really all have something to teach and something that we can learn. Most of the mentors that I have across the country I've connected with through my role in the academy, and that was really my entry point into the academy was through the academy mentoring program. And with some great mentors along the way, they encouraged me to continue my path up to the board and then through the presidency. So I would say that mentoring has just tremendously affected my career trajectory and my life personally and professionally.
That's great. Thanks. Wendy or Gabe, do you have any other perspectives on the role of mentors that you'd like to share?
So I was really fortunate. My orthotics residency supervisor was Tom DeBello, and he has been just a tremendous mentor to me for my whole career. And actually, he was the one who approached me about volunteering with the academy and about becoming a board member, and then I went through the chairs for that, and it's been great. And I still call him up every once in a while to ask his opinion on things. I don't always agree, but it's always interesting to hear what Tom has to say. And I think that both having mentors and then mentoring others is a tremendous growth experience. I think that I've been a mentor through the academy mentoring program, but then I was also a residency director for, 15 years. So each of my people who were my residents started out as people that I was mentoring, and now they're colleagues, and sometimes they mentor me now, sometimes I mentor them. And I think that being an orthotist prosthetist, you have to be continually learning, and the only way to do that is to be reaching both up and down.
Fantastic advice. Thank you. You know, our mentors can be a real trusted advisor and can certainly help us gain some insight, invaluable insight. I think I'd like to transition a little now into planning your career and the perspectives on that. You know, what one or two pieces of advice would you offer to the people on the call today? Wendy, would you like to start?
Sure. Don't let anyone else define success for you. You might find that the thing that floats your boat is seeing patients 3 days a week and not doing management. On the other hand, you may want to speak nationally or internationally. You have to know what makes you happy. And there's no one size fits all for that. I mean, I think that the four of us on the call are a perfect example of the fact that there's no one perfect trajectory. And if there's something that you want, don't be afraid to ask for it. I mean, both Gabe and Leigh work part-time. They only got to work part-time. I can guarantee their bosses didn't come to them and say, hey, would you like to work part-time instead of full-time? It just doesn't happen. And the only way you're going to be able to get what you want is if you let other people know what that is. And I think that ultimately, if you are happy, if you achieve personal fulfillment, you are going to be a better employee for them. So don't be afraid of the ask as long as there's a reason behind it.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice. Gabe, would you like to share?
I would encourage all of us to embrace change. any of us who've been in the field for even just a short period of time have already experienced some pretty significant changes in the industry. And change can be really hard. It can be really hard to persevere well through change. I would say that if we surround ourselves with people who are motivating and optimistic, they're visionary, they're problem solvers, encouragers, if you are able to surround yourself with this kind of person, then making it through change is a lot easier. Like you won't just be able to persevere well, but you would actually thrive in the midst of it. So surround yourself with a solid tribe, a really good tribe of people.
I would just add, don't wait until you're ready. You can hear from each of us that we've jumped into opportunities that were probably a little bit beyond our skill set. I would say that's definitely true for me. Was I ready to be Academy president? No way. Right? You hear from Gabe and her story of starting a practice so young, and Wendy and moving into education and later on in her career. But, if you wait until you're ready, that opportunity may not be there at that point. You have to surround yourself, like you said, Gabe, with people who can support you and help you grow the skills that you need to fill that position. But if you do that, if you have those people around you, if you're willing to work hard and learn new things, then you can do things that are a little bit beyond what you're currently ready to do, and you will become, it's those stretch opportunities that make you a better person and a better professional.
Absolutely, point on. It reminds me of Sheryl Sandberg. If you've ever listened to her TEDx talk, she talks about the difference between men and women. And for the most part, what she was saying is men tend to, it's natural for them to kind of raise their hand up and say, yes, I'm ready for a role, even if they don't necessarily have, all of the requirements of the role. As women, I think that we step back and say, oh, I'm not appropriate for that position because I don't check off all of the requirements, rather than saying, I don't have it now, but I know that I can get it. I can grow into that. So, Leigh, that's fantastic advice. It really is. And now I think I, would like to kind of switch a little bit and go to our next question. As our second topic, I would like to talk a little bit about work-life effectiveness, regardless of the industry or the job that we're in, or if it's a man or a woman. There's that work-life effectiveness. I think we're trying to abandon the word balance now. But, it's likely so for women, because we do try to take on not just our workload and make sure that we're doing that perfectly, but we're also trying to take on the women's roles at home and try to do that at 100% as well. What challenges do you see or you've experienced in establishing that role of or having that work-life effectiveness?
I would love to start, Regina. And I will just put out there what you had mentioned earlier is time, managing my time. How am I going to be more efficient with the use of my time? And I'm not simply talking about how am I going to get done all of the things that I need to get done when I'm in the office, taking care of patients and employee matters and strategizing with meetings. I'm talking about simultaneous management of my work life and my personal life, because those two spheres are 100% interconnected. I do not make decisions in one without considering the impact of the other. For example, if I'm asked to speak at a conference, say on a Saturday, I not only have to consider what's going on in the life of my family on that Saturday, but what kind of preparation is going to be required leading up to that conference. I'm going to have to find that time in the margins in the days or weeks or months ahead in order to prepare for that Saturday. And is that, do I have the time for that? I mean, we all struggle with the fact that there still are only 168 hours a week. So somewhere the time has to show up. So developing behaviors that help to manage that is necessary. I know that one of the things that really stresses me out is trying to add more things to my calendar, whether that is grabbing coffee with a friend, which I want to do, or planning a meeting to collaborate with a team, which I want to do. Trying to find time to put that stuff in there can be really overwhelming. But if I tend to be more proactive, like throw out, hey team, what about this date and time to touch on these things that we were talking about? I am then a little bit more offensive about how I manage my calendar versus being on the defensive and trying to schedule things around what has already been put out there. So being proactive about managing my time. Also just knowing myself, knowing that I'm a doer. I like to help. I like to say yes. I like to assist. If I know that my talent, my skill set is kind of suited for what you're asking, I want to be able to say yes. But knowing that that's not always a possibility, I've found that delegation is a necessity, and surrounding yourself with people who are extremely reliable that you can lean into to do when you don't need to be the one that's the doer. That's another trait that I've become more in tune with over time. And I will just say, Regina, I think you touched on the biggest challenge that all of us have when we're addressing work-life effectiveness, and it's this weight that we carry that kind of drags us down of, am I doing it right? This mental block that we have, like you said, we are moving away from even using the term work-life balance because it puts this picture in our head that there's this scale, right? That somehow your work and your personal life have to be at this level, when all of us know it looks a lot more like this or like this. And we can be in seasons when our life is like this, and we have days that are doing this to us. So we are always assessing, is this right? Is this right? Am I doing it right? And I think we need to be better at giving ourselves permission at saying, yeah, this is good, and so is this. So we can just take that burden off, take that weight off, and keep persevering, doing things like attending webinars and listening to podcasts and asking others. Those are a few to top it off.
I'd like to add something to that. So I don't think that anyone can be a working mother alone. I think that it takes a community, and whether that community is family that lives close by, or whether it's neighbors, or whether it's coworkers, or a combination of those things, I think that it's important to develop a safety net around you, so that if you have a patient who shows up 45 minutes late to an appointment and you know daycare is closing at 6, you're not panicking, that you have somebody that you can turn to and say, hey, can you pick up Ethan at daycare? I'm not going to be able to get there on time. I think that if we take it upon ourselves to have to be these super women, we're going to burn out. All I can say is, I tell the story that I was in the room with the patient and my receptionist knocks on the door and she says, you know, your husband's on the phone and he's starting to panic because the kids didn't come off the bus today. Do you want to talk to him, or do you want me just to let him know that they have piano on Tuesday? So, you know, my receptionist knew my kid's schedule better than my husband did. So, you know, I think that it's important to share around, and the best way to develop that sort of network that will help you is to be that person for other people. So if you volunteer to, hey, you know, I'm going to be at the school anyway, can I pick up your kids? Then they'll be willing to do it for you. It makes life so much more enjoyable and manageable.
Absolutely. I mean, I think for me, it looks like creating some space. I have to be able to say no, like you said, Gabe, sometimes, you know, and I also, in my schedule, what's really worked is to add a couple extra hours at the end of the day. So like Wendy mentioned, I work a 32-hour schedule, so I'm working 5 days a week, but shorter days. So I have a little bit of extra time in the afternoon to manage those things that I want to do with my kids, like the piano lessons and the swim lessons. And that may not be possible for everyone, but you know, you never know until you ask, until you make a plan to try to find a solution that works for both you, your family, and your employer. And I think the thing that's the hardest for me is to really just to let go of the guilt and to give myself a little more grace, because, you know, I want to be the best mom. I want to be the best clinician. I want to be the best employee. And sometimes they are just in conflict. You know, you just never plan to wake up in the middle of the night to a vomiting child. That just throws your whole day out of whack, you know, but our patients are relying on us. So maybe sometimes that looks like relying on your village, you know, saying, hey, can you take, I've got a really big patient today. Can your partner stay home with the kid? Can your parents or your trusted babysitter stay home with a sick child? Sometimes vomiting is a situation that calls only for moms. And those are the times that, you know, our patients have to understand that we're humans too, and that we have people who rely on us. And when that happens, you know, we have to not feel guilty that we're at work when we're at work, or feel guilty that we're at home when we're at home, but be able to be present in both situations and know that the other ones, they can work each other out.
You're absolutely right. Sometimes the pressure of having that perfectionist expectation is a real burden. That's a great advice there. So, Gabe, would you mind taking a few minutes and giving us your perception or recommendations on how to talk to your manager about your work-life concerns?
Yeah, let me use the example of when I wanted to move part-time. So I would say the first thing that you would want to do is just make sure that you ask for their time and make sure it's not a surprise. You don't want something like your concerns about your work-life effectiveness to be a hallway conversation. You want this to be intentional sit-down time. So ask your manager for a time to sit and talk. Kind of looks like, hey, boss, when you're in town next, I would love it if we could carve out 30 minutes or so for us to sit down and discuss some ideas that I have around improving efficiencies within the office as I'm preparing to leave for maternity leave in the next series of months. So ask for time and prepare them to know that what you're wanting to talk about. The second thing is that when you actually come to that discussion, you really want to make sure that not only are you presenting your requests and your desires transparently to your employer, but you also want to be thoughtful in proposing a solution that's going to take into account your employer's potential concerns. So I wanted to start working part-time 3 days a week. And obviously, we couldn't shut down the office 2 days, right? How are we going to do to maintain the amount of service that we've been providing for these previous 5 years? So I didn't just say, oh, we need to hire somebody. I was thinking through what's the right type of person to bring on board. So I did a little bit of research to find out what kind of patients had we been working with over the past 5 years, what type of employee would be the best suited to come on board. And so I brought this very thorough proposal to my manager and said, and I think the best thing for the organization and for our team here is to bring on a CPED. That would be an orthotic fitter as well. So having a really thoughtful and thorough proposal that takes the employer's concerns into mind would be the next strategy. And then finally, be prepared that the answer might not be yes, or it might be, yes, I want to absolutely support you in this, but only 80% of it can be a yes. So you really need to know what your absolutes are, the non-negotiables of this is what has to happen for me, and then be willing to be flexible and negotiate. So for me, a non-negotiable was, an absolute was, I really needed to move to a part-time schedule. So when I brought that up with my employer, I knew he was behind me. He absolutely cared that this worked out for my benefit. But because he's a really good boss, he was also considering, what does that look like for the team that I'm managing? And what does that look like for my organization? So he was having to balance, not saying yes right away, but what are all of the considerations to take into account before making a solution, right, for Gabe? So that looked like another conversation where it was, hey, Gabe, I want to support you in this, but I just don't know. We don't really have a template out there as to how does somebody manage part-time. So I don't know that you're going to be able to manage as well as be part-time. To which my response was, part-time was really my absolute. Managing was not. So if that's the case, I would be fine joining the team as a clinician, or, again, negotiating. I would love to see what it would look like if we gave this a try. Let's give it 3 months and see how it works out. Make sure that it works, it's the right balance for me and it's the right fit for the organization. And if so, great, here's a new template that we've started. And so at the end of the day, just be willing to be really flexible with your proposal.
You know, if you have 9 months to prepare for childbirth, if you can give them 6 of those months to know that you're going to be having a baby, that's a huge thing. And it also is, you know, a level of trust, that you trust them and they trust you.
What I find interesting about Gabe's story is, you know, she was willing to say, look, I understand as an organization that may not work. And I'm willing to say, let me be a staff prosthetist. But, you know, give me the opportunity to try and let's see how it works out. If it doesn't work out, we'll find another solution. So really great advice. Thank you, Gabe. So now would you guys be open to answering some questions from our folks on the call? Rachel, would you mind opening it up to some Q&A?
The first question is, can you offer suggestions on preventing burnout?
I would encourage us to be aware of some of those early warning signs. Typically, if you're starting to get close to being burnt out, you're sounding a lot more cynical. You might be a lot more critical of other people. You might have this increased feeling of chaos or constant stress in your life. You would probably be a lot more irritable and impatient with patients as well as coworkers. Recognizing some of those early warning signs and then seeking help. You need to speak out and be an advocate for yourself. So bring up your concerns right away, because your manager may not be aware of where you are, of what's going on. I can tell you that a series of months ago, I read this article about burnout, thought it was really interesting, and I had my clinical staff read it as well. And then I had this anonymous questionnaire afterwards where I asked the clinical staff, hey, I want to know, you're all full-time employees, how many hours do you feel is kind of like what you plan to work? At what point are you going to hit a tipping point? If you have to work regularly more than this number, are you going to start feeling burnt out? And with 5 different responses, my responses were anything from 41 hours a week to 51 hours a week. If you're that 41 hour a week person and you're consistently putting in 43 hours a week, I might not know, because there's that 51 hour a week person who's running on all cylinders at 43 hours a week. So you really need to speak up to be an advocate of where you are personally. And then I would encourage you to have somebody in your life that would help keep you accountable, a spouse or a close friend. It might be your manager that asks you intentional questions of, how are you doing? How much time are you putting in? Are you still loving what you do? On some type of regular frequency, to make sure that you're not on a slippery slope towards that end.
If I can add to that, I think that by nature, most prosthetists and orthotists are caregivers. We're caring for our patients, and then as women, and really women and men, we find ourselves often caring for other people as well, our children, our partners, our parents, our friends. But we can't pour from an empty cup. You have to find time to take care of yourself. And self-care is a big topic these days. And I think for most of us, it probably doesn't mean that we have time, an hour a day, or, a weekly manicure, or, we have to find those times in those little margins and the things that really recharge your batteries. So that may be reading. It may be taking that, that morning cup of coffee by yourself. For me, it's rising before the sun to jog and to have a jogging therapy session with my neighborhood girlfriends. That is one of the things that just keeps me sane. And I have to find that time, even though I have to sacrifice a little bit of sleep to get that. So if you can identify what recharges you and find some time to fit that in, then the people around you will benefit. You may feel like you're taking time away from your family to do those, but really you'll be giving back to them by being a better you and a better caregiver.
For me, I find that mentoring, especially being a residency director, was a huge help to thwart any burnout, because the students come in, the residents come in, and they're so enthusiastic, and they've got all of this positive energy. And if you can surround yourself with the givers of joy as opposed to the sappers of joy, you'll be a lot happier.
So next question is, can you tell us again who joined the call? Is this just Hanger clinicians?
Oh, I can speak to that. Hanger as a corporation has had a Women in Leadership initiative for a number of years for, Hanger Clinic, ACP, SureFit, SPS, all of the divisions within the Hanger Corporation. That's been in place for a number of years. But with this webinar, we actually invited everyone in the industry. This is open to everyone.
Perfect, thank you. So we have a lot of great questions still pouring in here. When proposing to have someone replace you during your leave, how do you transition back into work life after you have come back from something like maternity leave?
Well, that might be directed towards me. The transition is with a lot of grace. We're all figuring it out. I'm figuring it out as the employee, trying to see what this looks like part-time, trying to find what this new balance is in my life. My team is figuring out how to communicate with me. My office is open 5 days a week. What does the communication look like on those days that I'm not in the office? So it's very dynamic, and just with a lot of grace extended towards one another, that we're going to get there. If we all are motivated to make this happen, we're going to get there.
Yeah, I can add to that. I found, an interesting thing that was illuminated during my last maternity leave is that I wasn't doing a great job educating my colleagues on the skills that I was doing. So I was treating patients a specific way with scoliosis bracing, and that was evolving, and it was, learning from experts around the country and from, new research articles. And I wasn't translating that knowledge to my colleagues. And really, I didn't realize it, but I was holding them back in their career growth. And it was eye-opening to me that when I wasn't there, that they weren't able to continue doing what I had been doing. And it totally changed the way I educate the people around me. Because now I know I have to step back. I have to take my hands off and let them do it, let them figure it out, so that when I'm not there, they can, and also so that they can learn and grow in their careers, and we can all better serve our patients. So really being out of the office was an opportunity that got me out of the way for some of my colleagues to take their careers to the next level. The same as when the person retired, it was that opportunity for me. Fortunately, I was able to come back, but now we work together. We have similar skill sets. We learn and grow together. And instead of stepping in where someone needs more help, I step back and just teach them how to do it themselves.
Yeah, if the question is concerned that you may not have your position to come back to, rest assured there is so much work in O&P. I know when I came back from both maternity leaves, and actually I even took a leave of absence after that, my patients, my coworkers welcomed me back with open arms. And a lot of the patients actually, they put off getting their new orthosis or prosthesis until I got back because there's that level of trust that they have. So I wouldn't be overly concerned about that. You may, if you've given out your cell phone number, you may get calls while you're on maternity leave saying, is it this week you're coming back? Is it next week you're coming back? But I wouldn't worry about taking the time off at all. Take what you need for your child, take what you need for yourself, and you need time for yourself to recover before you're able to be that person who can be the caregiver for others.
So the next question that we have that we'd love to have some thoughts on is, was there an opportunity that you didn't take that you wish you did?
That's a tough one. I would say that in my experience so far, most of the opportunities that I chose not to take ended up being the right decision in the long run. I think that if you can really trust your gut on that, then sometimes it just does work out. For example, an opportunity had arisen to go into education at Georgia Tech. That was an opportunity that was really appealing to me. It's something that I've always been interested in, but the timing just wasn't right. It was when my daughter, I was actually still pregnant with my 3-year-old. So I was looking at, a huge life change, adding a child, and then to change a career as well. It wasn't the right time. And looking back, it was absolutely the best decision. 1, because I love my job, and 2, because now the program is closed. So I would say for me, most of the times that I have, just really taken the time to sit by myself with these big life decisions. And if the answer has been no, and it's not a no based out of fear, but a no based out of a gut feeling that this is just not the right path, that in the end, I've been happy with that decision.
Yeah, and I guess I would echo that as well. I've had opportunities that maybe weren't right for the family as a whole. It might have been a career move for me, but might have taken me away from my kids, especially when they were in high school. And I didn't want to do that. And I can't really say it was a wrong decision because happy with where I am right now. It's all for the best in this best of all possible worlds. And if you go with your gut again, I think that you can't make a wrong move.
And I think, this has actually happened to me where my answer was, it's not a no, it's a no for now. Because, if you're assessing kind of where you are and you don't feel like it's the right decision at that point, maybe it's a no for now, but, come back to me. Don't forget about me. Come back to me, but it's not the right fit for now.
I would also add, it feels like it could be a wrong decision because it seems like it's a carrot, right? Like, this looks like a promotion that I am saying no to right now, or my gut is not jiving with it. And so it feels like I must be making the wrong decision. But recognizing that this field is so dynamic and flexible, and opportunities, like you said, Wendy, they just keep presenting themselves. I know, for example, Hanger, we know that career navigation can be really tricky. And so in order to help people to try to navigate their way through opportunities within their career and find out what really drives them, we've had a means for that to happen. We launched this career level pathways for all of our clinicians. So whether somebody wants to move towards management or be specialists in a specific kind of patient care, or they want to move into scientific research, there are ways that you can find direction. And if you get partway down a path and say, yeah, this was not right for me, it's okay to be flexible and to change. There are lots of opportunities within the industry.
And, and maybe part of the reason that we're all answering sort of the same way is we're forward lookers, right? There's no looking back with regret. I mean, the decision has been made and we are moving forward with it. We're not looking back saying, oh, I should have.
Great point. There's not only one path. There's not only one step-by-step way to success. And you're not going to look back and say, if only I had gone this other direction, my life would have been, this instead of this. That path sometimes is winding and sometimes you go a little bit backwards, but there are lots of different ways to get to your definition of success.
And maybe happiness is a better word than success.
It's a great point. It's a fantastic point.
Next question. Do any of you partake in any regular women in O&P events or talks?
Yes, this is a great group here because it's actually Wendy and myself who started the Academy Women in O&P. So I was a resident at the time, and Wendy was the president of the Academy, and we started the Academy's Women in O&P committee that continues now. So I think both of us are still active there. They have a great social event every year at the meeting, which is one of my favorite events to go to. And there was one at AOPA last month as well.
Yeah, actually the Women in O&P helped us set up an outreach to elementary school children in Detroit a couple months ago, and that was really fun too.
That's great.
Next question is, what is a suggestion for how to move forward in the profession as far as whether you need to pick a specialty or how to navigate the 5-year mark where it feels like you have achieved everything school-related, and now what?
I've never been a checkbox kind of person, so I didn't really have a 5-year rule. And as Regina pointed out, I was really more, look at this opportunity, I'll go this way. It wasn't really a plan on my part. It was really more of a reaction rather than goal-oriented. I know, Gabe, you were going to say something.
I feel like this industry specifically has some really incredible potential because there are things that are like hobbies to us, things that we enjoy doing, and then we typically transition into getting a job, something that pays bills and we can make money. But then a job turns into a career when we feel like we're on a path somewhere, but a career can transform into this vocation, which is like a calling almost, like something that you're very, very passionate about. And I would suggest that you go that direction. This field, what we do for people is amazing. No matter what you're doing for the industry, whether it's administrative or technical or clinical, what we do is radically amazing. And so make decisions that drive you towards what you're passionate about, which would transform your career into this vocation for you, because you will make some incredible impact in your community and in the industry and in the world when you are loving and thriving in what you're doing.
The next question is, how do you properly and respectfully inform your employer that you want to climb the ladder, going after available promotions?
You should.
Yeah.
That's what I would recommend. You absolutely should.
If you know that there's a position opening up, I would go in and say, I know this position is opening up. I would like you to consider me for it. Because if you don't put your hat in the ring, no one else is going to.
Or create a position. And the structure that you're working within might have kind of a template, but if you're able to be outside the box thinking and you can see how there would be added value if this position existed for the company, then propose that, put that out there, and put your name in the bucket, like you said, Wendy.
Sometimes you have to be willing to take some big risks too if you want to make that next step. It's going to look a lot different depending on where you work. In a hospital setting, things are different than in a private practice and in a hangar practice. If you work for the owner, then, that top may be a little harder to break through than if you work for an organization that has a structure that you can move up. You may not, you have a place to go. And so sometimes that may look like exploring new opportunities, taking chances, and looking at what else is out there. But at any point, you can talk to your manager and say, what skills do you think that I can work on to get to that next level, whether that be clinically or in management, research. They can help you identify where you can improve.
Unless they know then they may be trying to take on a lot of things, even if it is the owner of the company, that they're overwhelmed. And if they know that you're in a position to where you want to take on more responsibility or you want to develop more, then it could help them a lot, where they're like, oh, I'm so glad that you said that. There's a lot of things over here on this side that I could really use some help with that I feel like it's a great development opportunity for you.
And I think that you need to be your own best advocate. I think that women bring an unbelievable skill set to management. I think that we are inherent team builders. I think we are inherent listeners and carers and understand how people work and what motivates them in really unique ways. And that's a skill set that we need to shout from the mountaintops and say, this is something that I can bring to this team that I don't think anyone else can, and have you considered doing it this way?
Great. Next question is, what advice would you give to someone just coming into a management position?
I've recently been there. I've only been supervising for a couple of years. And I'll tell you, I think that if you can be honest with the people that you're working with about where you are and what you see for how you guys can work together, I think that you guys can grow together. So you don't have to go in pretending that you have all of the skills already. You can be upfront with what you're good at and what you know is a new thing for you. And then together you guys can work on that. And I think you can also seek your people who are a stage ahead of you elsewhere. So whether that be your boss in the office or across the country, people who have successfully made this transition. And you can seek mentoring at any stage in your career. So mentors is, having a mentor is not just for someone who's just a resident or recently a resident. Anytime you need a new skill set, you can seek a mentor who has gone that path before you. And like I said earlier, I feel like people in this profession are just really generous with that knowledge and willing to step in and give you the help that you need.
When I started in positions where I was a manager, I would strongly recommend meeting with each individual one-on-one and asking their opinion, getting their advice, finding out what makes them tick. And that can be a lunch, it can be, before work, it can be after work, wherever you feel it's going to be the best opportunity for them to be open and honest with you and say, this is completely between you and me. I won't share it with anyone else. But, I know to be in management, we have to develop a team that works well together. And the only way we can do that is if I know what works for you and work that into the mix.
And I would add, receive feedback, ask for it. I make it a habit that during my my biannual employee reviews, I ask my employees, how can I support you better? In what ways am I holding you back from doing what you want to do? So I'm soliciting feedback from those who I am managing, and I'm also asking my management, what can I be doing? What am I missing? What do I not seem to have a pulse on from your perspective? So solicit feedback and listen and respond accordingly.
And remember that you can't, if your goal is to continue to move up, you have to be developing the people there to fill your space. You can't move to that next step unless you have someone ready to take on yours. And that may be clinically or, in supervision or whatever the case may be, that you need, that developing them is really long-term going to help both them and you.
Thank you, everyone, for submitting all of your questions, even those that we were unable to get to at this time. So, ladies, I just want to let you know, many people are wanting your contact information, so if you want to share that at some point. But at this time, I'll pass it over to Ms. Regina.
Thank you, Leigh, Gabe, Wendy, for sharing your experiences and your advice with us today. You guys shared such fantastic insight. And we're so grateful that you took time out of your schedules to be with us. I know that we only have a couple of seconds left, but is there, a favorite or inspirational quote that you'd like to share with us before we end our call?
So actually, I've been told that it might not have come from this source, but up until this point, I believe that this quote had come from C.S. Lewis, as he wrote the Chronicle of Narnia, which is a children's series, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe. But from the book Prince Caspian, he writes, "Isn't it funny how day by day nothing changes, but when you look back, everything is?"
So mine's not nearly so cerebral. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. That would be Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, so I have one from Winston Churchill, and it says, success is not final and failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that counts.
That's fantastic. That really is. Thank you guys. Thank you for joining us today for the Hanger and SPS PowerUp webinar. We really appreciate feedback. It's very, very helpful to understand if you value the webinar and the content. If you wouldn't mind also sharing this webinar with your colleagues, your friends, people who you feel might find it valuable. The recording of this will be on both the Hanger website as well as the SPS website, so you could go to it and watch it later if you prefer. And Rachel, I will turn it back over to you.
Perfect. So thank you everyone for taking the time to join this call, and we look forward to having more. Everyone have a great day. I'll go ahead and end the session for everyone.
Thanks, guys.